tweet it out. Go to Rockfin. All right, so we are live on Rockfin 2. Let's see if we're live on YouTube. There's a delay sometimes.
Oh, I understand. That happens a lot.
Okay. Now it is up and running. Okay, cool. Welcome to Sabby's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest today is RJ from Fred Hampton Leftists. He's also the host of Revolutionary Jargon with RJ. Hey, RJ.
Hi, how are you guys? I'm excited to be on the Sabby Sab show. I've had you on my show actually months ago. So that was actually a very exciting time. That's when I met you the first time, and I'm really happy to be on your podcast.
Thanks so much for coming on anytime. So, RJ, before we dive into today's discussion, RJ and I are going to be talking about the three Bs, Bernie, Biden, and Bezos, because they've all been in the news this week. But before we do that, can you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and about FHL?
Yeah, I can do that. About myself and my political background, I grew up being a conservative Democrat. So that's a conservative Democrat in terms of like family being like Obama supporters back in like 2008. Yay, Obama back then. But really, what awoke in my eyes to politics is really the election of Donald Trump, because not in the sense that, oh, orange man bad, but it's like, well, how do we get to this point where we elected a guy like this? What was the cultural reaction? And how do we get to this point? So I did a lot of introspection, and I was shopping around, and I went through like different types of politicians. I was more of let's see, I started off being a Beto stan. That was back in like 2018 when he ran against Ted Cruz and lost. And then I was a Mayor Pete stan, and I was a Liz Warren stan. So I went all these different phases trying to figure out where I was going. I used to be conservative Dem, libertarian, left wing libertarian, social Dem, socialist, well, democratic socialist, then socialist, and then now communist now. So like I'm slowly getting there. So that's why when I have conversations with those who may be to the right of me, which is most of the time, I'm able to understand where they're coming from and really have constructive conversations to bring them to the left, or really to understand their own personal situations. And kind of the work I'm doing with Fred Hampton Leftists is actually what I just mentioned. A lot of times I have guests who are farther to the left of me and correct me on some things, which also helps me learn. That way, when I talk to other individuals, it'll be greater. And I've had socialists on my show, I've had social Dems, and we have really great conversations about the political situations that's happening in their towns and their cities and their states, and also about how the cultural climate and the political climate affects them personally. So on my show, Revolutionary Jargon, we go on long tangents like the ones I'm giving now, really breaking down what's happening in current politics, as well as your own personal politics. And in terms of Fred Hampton Leftists, each one of us adds really multiple different ways in towards our media organization right now. Nick's show is more talk show style. He gives his rant for 15 minutes. The other guests, they just go back and forth, and it really brings up a lot of fun, different discussions you honestly don't even think about when it's just one-on-one versus you being live. CJ's show, he brings on a lot of big guests. He break down, his big thing is breaking out like class versus race, talk about those type of issues. JB Font show on Sundays, check that out. He does great work as well, really breaking down really what's going on in the healthcare system, and as well with working class politics. Check out Nerdologics with our co-host Jackie Poles. She ties nerd culture like Marvel, DC Comics, that type of stuff with politics as well. I'll be on there this Monday, actually, tomorrow, so it should be fun as well. I hope I didn't leave anyone out. Oh, and also check out our Thursday show, which has all of us tied together. We break down all the stories. We were bashing Obama this week. We were bashing Biden. So it's a really cool showcast to not only inform you about what's happening in current politics, but just to have fun. And that's what it's all about.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. So we're talking about the three Bs, Bernie, Biden, and Bezos. Which B do you want to talk about first?
Let's go with the billionaire.
I just realized that didn't come out right. Which B do you want to talk about first? Oh boy. So
That
Jeff
went right over my
Bezos.
head.
Yeah, I know. Jeff Bezos. So how do you feel about the Senate talking about bailing Bezos out?
That is the. Can you curse on the show?
Yes.
That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Like a guy who is worth $150 billion, a guy who is estimated by 2025 to be the first ever trillionaire in terms of like today's money. And really what's surprising is you have like some right wingers, some Republicans who are like, this is bullshit. And we're in a Democratic administration, Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and they're all thinking about bailing out Jeff Bezos. Not only is it appalling because culturally the Democrats are supposed to be the ones that are for working class people, but on the other hand, it's like, why are we even having this conversation? So that's my initial thoughts about that.
I'm glad you brought up that it's on both sides too, because I've had Republican friends say the same thing. They're like, look, this is just ridiculous. This guy has so much money. And, actually, Amazon still was able to make money during the pandemic. Unlike a lot of other companies and businesses that had to close, they were still like having good business because all those other stores were closed and everybody had to order so much things from Amazon. So it's like you made a bad business investment. Why does the government have to bail you out? And then my other thing is like, so we can bail out Jeff Bezos, but we can't give everybody health care.
I agree 100%. And really, if you look at a lot of these, not just Jeffrey Bezos, I know we're picking on him because he's the one of the worst. So it's a little bit more fun, but look at all these other companies. Look at all these other billionaires. I mean, they've doubled their net worths the last 2 years, when other times you could make the argument it took them at least 20 years to make those billions of dollars. And the way that these businesses, the business community right now is going, COVID-19 with like the government shutdowns or whatever, and really with the failure of what's that? I think the program they did to support small businesses or whatever, and the big businesses looted it, like literally, like it's like some of these big businesses like labeled themselves as small businesses according to the rules in which that law would put in place, and they took some money. Like the Los Angeles Lakers took the PPE loans, and it's like they're a big business. They make billions of dollars a year, and so it's that type of stuff which you're allowing small businesses to fail, mom and pop stores to suffer, all to funnel all that excess money to Amazon. So now Amazon is getting bigger and bigger, and if they have all this extra money, it's more influence. And so now the small pop stores, they're burning out to dry. And that's also going to make it very difficult for really working class people to find opportunities for more jobs, because it's either no job or Amazon. And you see that all across the country, big city or small, it's like that.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I know that like here in Boston, they've closed a lot of businesses like during COVID, permanently shut down. And I'm talking places that were like tourist attractions on Boston Street and Back Bay, closed, gone forever. And then at the same time, before COVID happened, they were already starting to close retail shops in the malls here because so many people were just shopping online at Amazon. They were just like, we're just not making the money. So I just don't feel bad for Jeff Bezos. I'm like, you got yourself in the situation, you get yourself out of it. That's what they tell us, right?
Exactly, 100%. How come Amazon didn't save money for a hard time?
I know, right?
That's what they tell us all the time. Well, so you have to be responsible. The economic downturn is going to happen. How come you didn't save the excess money you had during the good time? And that's the funny part, because when COVID hit and the stock market went swoof right down, they kicked us out of the front of the line and said, nope, this is our money. So that's the crazy part. And all these, like the HEROES Act, the CARES Act, largest upward transfer of wealth in American history, it made it so difficult. And they just gave us $1,200, which is basically crumbs if you look at the type of money that we were giving big business, more money to the defense industry, Raytheon, all these different types of industries, and we're getting crumbs. And that's the problem.
Agreed. So you brought up something that makes me want to dive into Biden next. So Otto, I mean, we could talk about a lot of things with Joe Biden this week. He's just been a mess. But Otto said something, he tweeted something that I thought was really interesting in reference to Joe Biden. So this is what he said. Otto said, remember, police abuse out of control, Biden sides with cops. Inadequate healthcare coverage, Biden sides with insurance companies. Student debt out of control, Biden sides with banks. Labor undervalued, Biden sides with business. Genocide in the Middle East, Biden sides with war criminals. What do you think about that?
I think it's accurate. It explains in Biden's entire career. But also, this is, let me preface this. This basically shows Biden's entire career. And by him being so pro-establishment, and by look at the Trump presidency, right? He ran as this anti-establishment figure. We all know that's bullshit, because when he got there, he was for big business, for all these big corporations, yada, yada, yada. But the cultural climate of, oh, we need a guy responsible, someone we don't have to turn on the news every day and get like a headache or our blood pressure goes up. So they go at Uncle Joe, because he's the most establishment alive in a while. But the problem is that people thought, oh, once he gets there, we'll have sympathy. He'll understand the error of his ways. We could push him left. And it's like, the evidence is right in front of your face. Like, this is the type of crap not only he's doing now, but he's done his entire career. I mean, Joe Biden in the United States Senate, at times, he was farther to the right than Reagan. So it's like, what are we doing? So what you're showing right here, Biden siding with cops, same thing with Obama. Biden siding with insurance companies. It's his entire career. That's how he got his campaign contributions when he was in the United States Senate. One thing is missing is the credit card companies in Delaware. He sided with all of them. Yep. He's for that shit too. And of course, why would he be for student debt cancellation when he was for the bankruptcy bill? And it's like, what are we doing, guys? So, but of course, I'm gonna break him down, every one. Like, even with labor undervalued, this is the same guy, Uncle Joe, who pretends to be middle class Joe from Scranton. But anytime, like, hey, $15 minimum wage, unfortunately, guys, it's not going to be included in a budget reconciliation bill. You know, the Senate parliamentarian is the king of England. You know, we can't go against the parliamentarian. You know, and so all these different factors, even with genocide with the Middle East, Biden siding with war criminals. It's like Biden was one of the main guys during 2001 pushing for the Patriot Act. In fact, he writ the preliminary bill which created the Patriot Act. So it's like, I don't know what we're doing. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not surprised by this, actually.
Yeah. And in reference to like his middle class life, because I was talking to Terrell Anderson and he brought this up. Terrell Anderson is running for Congress for Alabama's District 2. And he said that he doesn't really want to hear about Joe Biden's middle class struggle, because that was during a time when Black people were not allowed in Joe Biden's middle class.
Yeah.
And I thought he had a good point. I mean, like, he talks about that he struggled back during that time, but Black people were going through much harder like struggles than what Joe Biden went through. And I just feel like Joe Biden doesn't understand that. I feel like the Biden administration in general, they just don't understand young people today. They don't get young people. They say they get African Americans, but everything that they do policy wise, it actually just hurts African Americans. Like all the crime bills, that was all Joe Biden.
I think what you're getting at too is actually correct. The problem with the Democratic Party and with the political climate in America is that if you do something wrong culturally, you're canceled. So like politicians know not to say stupid like culture war shit out loud. But in terms of the actual politics and the policies, like it's almost like, well, what do you guys expect? It's only the Senate's only 50-50. It's a slim majority. We have to keep voting. So it's like, in terms of the cultural issues, there's no excuse. But in terms of the actual policy, the political policies, there's excessive nuance. And like, I agree, sometimes there is nuance needed for some of these like bills and stuff, all these different types of rules or whatever. But it's much more excessive on the cultural front instead of actually the political front with policies. Like the Senate parliamentarian, it's like Republicans literally fired the Senate parliamentarian, told them to piss off and pass what they wanted to. But I think that's the issue when you got like Joe Biden, who's super establishment, who's like, I'm just going to play by the rules, even though it's heavily in the favor of Republicans because they're the ones who created the rules. So it's like he's willing to be cut in order to follow the rules and seem like an institutionalist. You had an original point. I want to address that, but I think I went on a tangent.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Anthony's comment is funny. Trusting Joe Biden is like trusting lead water to not poison you.
Yes, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, go ahead, RJ.
I forgot your original question.
Oh, the racial comment. Oh, yeah. So yeah, Terrell Anderson had a point. He was saying that like when Joe Biden talks about his middle class struggle, Terrell said that he doesn't want to hear it because he said that was during a time when Black people were not allowed to be a part of Joe Biden's middle class.
Right. Oh, and you're also talking about young people. I'm young. I can talk on this. So I guess what's weird right now, what's scaring me is that, and this all leads up to the question you're asking. At the end of 2016, young people, whether you're like liberal young people, progressive young people, socialist, communists, they were all in agreement. Fuck the Democratic Party. They were leaving in drones. I believe half of millennials were done with capitalism. Yeah. And that scared the Democratic Party. That's why they were doing all this culture war front of going after the boomers. See, the young people, they don't know what they're doing. They're destroying like the field or whatever. And like this excessive pandering to sell shit to us that they know we're not going to buy. Like, remember hearing on like the news that young people are killing industries? And it's like, if you would actually offer something that we would like, we would buy it. But we're not going there because we're not liking what you're selling. It's amazing how they teach us that, oh, with the capitalism, with the free market and stuff, and they're completely against what they're doing by trying to force us to do something in which we're not going to do and then blame us for it. But the original point about like millennials and Gen Zers is that we're increasingly against the capitalistic system because two big depressions, a pandemic, like it's all so much. And if you look at the cultural, the professional workplace environment, it's way different from with our parents. It's actually a lot harder. The student debt is increasing. The pay is stagnant. So if like your parents all say all the time, well, I got out of college, I got a house at 25, I paid off my student debt in like 10 years or whatever. And it's like, not going to be the case with us because our wages are stagnant, student loans are increasing. I believe college tuition at times is 5 times higher now than it was way back then. I'm not sure with the numbers, but I know it's probably around those areas. But I think that's the different type of issue. And back to what Terrell said about Black people not being included in that middle class struggle. There's a thing called redlining, and that's something that was even concurrent after the Civil Rights Act. Because in America, once you write laws that definitively say you can't do anything, the establishment will always get closer and closer to that line as possible without actually crossing over, right? So that's what kind of redlining these type of abilities do, which really affect working class Black people. Like even FDR's policies, yes, in theory they're great, but they kind of excluded Black people back then. So that's what I have to say too about what Terrell said. I agree 100%.
Yeah, it's very true. Like even for me, like as a millennial, I see the difference from when I was growing up. My parents were able to live off of one income, at least for a couple of years. Like they didn't have to pay for daycare. My mom stayed home with me until I went to kindergarten. And then when I went to kindergarten, then she went back to work. She did the same thing with my little sister. So it's like today, I don't have one friend that I know of that is able to do that. Like all of my friends, both of them, the husband and the wife, have to work. And then so they have to pay for daycare. And from what they've told me, daycare is very expensive, more expensive than how it used to be. So I just feel like the Biden administration, like they don't understand that. Like when Bernie and Warren, and even though I'm not a fan of Warren, when they were talking about like we need universal like pre-K, like those things should be free. Those things should be covered here. Like people just can't afford it. The cost of living continues to increase. Wages are not adjusting for inflation. And then those same people will come on CNN and Fox News and they'll say, young people, we're concerned because young people are not getting married and they're not having families and they're not buying homes. I'm like, you don't want to pay us.
Yeah, I
I
agree with
mean,
that.
yeah, it's like what do they expect people to do? And like even when it comes to college, the education system, I work at a university. I've worked in higher ed for over 10 years. The amount of tuition or the way that tuition has increased dramatically over the past 10 years is insane. And this is why I highly encourage people, if you want to go to a 4-year college and you can do so and not go into debt doing it, then do it. But if you cannot, I encourage people go to community college, go to trade schools, do something like General Assembly where you can learn some of these tech skills and jump into those same companies without having to have that 4-year degree. Because at the end of the day, it's not worth it if you're going to graduate with over $100,000 in student loan debt and you're only going to be paid like $65,000 a year.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, that's kind of the situation I'm in. So you're you're definitely preaching to me. I will say, too, that electricians, plumbers, technicians that you're mentioning, those are fields that will never die because even though we as engineers who design it and put it together, those are the guys who maintenance it, and we need those. Like we need tons of them because evidently, look at our roads. I mean, they're pretty shitty. Our infrastructure is terrible, and so we need those type of industries and especially during COVID, like they're increasing. They're pretty profitable right now. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think Erica, the white trash socialist, right, on Twitter. She said, "Hey, trade skills are booming right now, and if you need anyone help, reach out to her. She can help you out with that." I have plenty of people who follow me that are yellow vests, so they're pretty cool. And those who work in construction right now, I believe right now is actually the work season because it starts in April, ends in November. That's where all the construction season is, and they're looking for people, and they're paying pretty well. So those different types of fields is what we need, and it's going to help you out in the long run.
Yes, and I found that out myself because like if something breaks like in my house, I have learned that I do not know how to fix it. I've tried and it has not been successful. So that's the first thing I got to do is pick up the phone and call someone like electrician or a plumber who's skilled in that. So you're right, like those fields, we still need people in those fields. And I feel bad for young people, like especially like when I think about like my students because I'm seeing like smaller liberal arts colleges close one after another because you just can't, there's no career in those fields anymore. It's like what are you going to do like with those degrees? So I'm seeing those close, but I'm still continuing to see large profitable universities continue to offer these majors that they know are not profitable. And I see all these kids like graduating with a degree in like, history. Okay, great. Well, what are you gonna do with that? And then they can't get a job, and then they end up like waiting tables, and they have this degree from a reputable university, like like Boston College or something like that, and you have all this student loan debt, and it's just really disappointing and sad. I'm gonna go to some of the comments in the chat real quick. So Anthony Reyes said the wages are criminally low.
I agree.
I agree with that. Uh, Boscore said, not to mention books, housing, lab fees, etc. College will nickel and dime you to death. That is very true.
Also, I think what's very interesting about colleges is that the college tuition you have to pay them is always fixed towards inflation. So you know how inflation is. Every year something gets more expensive. They match it with inflation in terms of your college tuition. But it's amazing how, in terms of our pay, in terms of what you get paid, and with your worker production, that doesn't really match. Like they're stagnant. It's stagnated. So it increasingly makes it more difficult for you to pay that off. And like some people just pay the minimum for the rest of their lives and just say fuck it because they know they're never going to pay it off, which is sad. It's incredibly difficult to comprehend. Like I wish there would be that's why we need student debt relief. And since we're still on Biden, like I think he just said he refusing to give even 10 grand. Like
Yep.
originally he said 50, and it's like, and he went down to 10. I'll give you guys 10. I knew it was bullshit, but then he just said 0, and I'm like, oh gosh. So it's I'm not like I didn't have any hopes at all, and I'm still frustrated because I feel for people, like people who, I mean, of course, there's of course, regardless of your political affiliation, that were really desperate and they voted for Biden because they thought like you were getting a 2K check or student debt relief, then to find out it's nothing, and it's going to be really hard to engage them back into politics now, and rightfully so.
Yes.
So that's what's making it difficult for us as leftists trying to not only make people's material conditions better, whether it's through our organizing or really through politics, which some lefties say electoral politics you should divest from. I agree a lot. So it just makes it difficult overall to really make changes in your own communities.
I agree. And then also with Biden, too, the one thing I think that frustrated me is that canceling student loan debt would actually decrease the racial wealth gap in this country right now. And Joe Biden doesn't want to do reparations, but he doesn't want to cancel student loan debt either, even though he said that he was going to cancel it for students that went to HBCUs. Like, that's really like disappointing. Like, you sat up there and you told all these like black students that, hey, you go to HBCU, I got you. I'm going to cancel this for you. And then you renege on that. And it's just, again, it's like pandering to black people. And I feel like that's something that Joe Biden, he did throughout his whole like campaign. He's continuing to do it. It's like, it's stuff like inviting George Floyd's family to the White House for dinner instead of defunding the police. He wants to give the police more money.
I agree 100%. I mean, Joe Biden's campaign. Look, hey, black woman, you want a black woman on the Supreme Court? Come on, black people, vote for me. And it's like, hey, you want a black woman as vice president? It's like, it's the obvious pandering. Like for us leftists who are against like Joe Biden and Obama, like we reject that. Like, it's like, come on, give us something actually tangible. But for those who are still in the Democratic camp, that was all they needed kind of at the end of the day, because their hatred for Donald Trump clouds their political thinking skills. Like that's what we're going up against, And also too, you said something else. I forgot what you said.
About the George Floyd?
Oh yeah, right. So I think one of George Floyd's cousins, she refused to go to the White House because she said, "I'm not here for a photo op.
Yeah.
There's no George Floyd Act. Deuces, I'm not coming." And I was like, wow. And on the left, the George Floyd Act does fund the police more. So I do want to say that the bill is pretty much trash. But for someone like her to recognize that her family is being used as a political tool by the establishment, not to actually fix the system and get justice for her beloved family member, I think it's valuable. It's actually, to me, it's actually really helpful to possibly bring her to the left, or really to have more activism going forward. That's just my take on that.
Agreed. And another thing I want to note too with Biden in reference to this situation is that he really, when him and Kamala spoke that live after, when they did that live press conference after they found Derek Chauvin like guilty, he was like, we really got to, do police reform. I just want to make this very clear to everyone. We already have police reform. Body cams was a part of police reform. Body cams are not preventing police officers from killing unarmed Black people. This is why I say police reform does not work. We've seen this before. You have to defund the police, not give them more money. And I personally believe you need to abolish the police. That means you need to tear the system down and it needs to be rebuilt. And there's actually one police department that has done that in Camden, New Jersey. They did that. They abolished their police department and they tore it down and they rebuilt it. A lot of people don't know these things. And, CNN, MSNBC, they're not going to tell you that. They don't want you to know those things. That's why you have like people like me and RJ here.
Right. And just to add to your point, reforms in terms of the establishment, they always can find a way to make a pinhole, to find a loophole out of what you want. And so, like, for instance, you brought up the body cams, which is very good. So prior times, it was hearsay. It's like, oh, the cop said this private citizen said that. If there's on watchers, those who are watching the scene as it progressed, then that's a little bit different. But most of the time, it's pretty much hearsay. He said this thing, the cop said this thing, person who got arrested say that thing. But the whole point, like you're saying, of having the body cams is like, okay, you see all the action. The cam is the judge, basically, for the situation. You go to court is very helpful. The issue with this is that many of the cops turn their body cam footages off. So even if you do have the reform put in place, the cops aren't following that rule. So they'll turn it. It just happens live. And also another thing that's a complete violation of the First Amendment coming up is the judges refusing to release the video. This happened plenty of times. Like one time, I believe who it was, I think last name Brown was killed by the cops. Not only did they blur out the cops' faces, but they told the families, here, you can have the footage, but we are barring you from releasing it to the general public.
Yep.
What is this? So like, it's really ridiculous how really unconstitutional these acts are. And it's like I said earlier on this show, the establishment will always get closest to the line that you say to them that they can't do to abuse your rights. So get as close to that line as possible. And this is one instance where we asked for reform put in place. They are getting close enough to the line, not to break it, but just to bend the rules a little bit to their favor.
Exactly. No, I agree 100%. And another thing in reference to releasing the body cam footage, a lot of times that only happens because the family pushed for it. The family members pushed for it. So it's like, we shouldn't even have to fight that. Like that shouldn't even be an issue. What are you trying to hide? If they did nothing wrong, then just release the footage. Like, look at the gentleman in Louisiana. The police officer said that he was in a car accident. That's how he died. Now we find out that's not true, that they dragged this man. So it's like, I could go on and on and on about policing, but I just feel like the Biden administration, they're doing like these baby steps. It's like, it's the kneeling with the kente cloth. It's just stupid. Like, it's the let's have the family come to the White House and have dinner. But we're not really going to try to fix anything about policing in this country and the way that they treat unarmed Black people. They're not really trying to fix anything.
I agree. And really, I agree. I mean, they, like, for instance, like Nancy Pelosi spoke in front of the CBC saying, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice. And it's like, when the term sacrifice means you have a choice to die. He didn't have a choice to die. He was murdered.
Yep.
And it's like, and she did it in front of the CBC, and the CBC didn't even push back on that. Like, they doubled down. And it's like, what is going on here? Oh, it's just ridiculous. I agree.
And the CBC is also problematic as well. People a lot of times don't think that because it has the word Black in the title. But the CBC, let's remember, they endorsed Elliot Engel over Jamal Bowman. Now, I'm not, crazy about Jamal Bowman right now either, because I don't feel like he's really showing up the way that he should. But that's just something to think about, just because it has like Black in the title, or even progressive, the Progressive Caucus. I mean, they have been known to be shady too. So you have to be careful about these titles.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, the biggest problem that we have with the left right now is, especially electorally, and in terms of like the politicians, the progressives we elected, is that this Congressional Progressive Caucus is basically babysitting. Like Nancy Pelosi goes to Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, and say, hey, you can give them this, but if they cross the line, they're cut off. Same thing with the CBC. Like I believe Cori Bush is in it, Ilhan Omar is in it, Jamal Bowman's in it as well. And for the CBC, who leads that? I think it's Jim Clyburn. You got what's her name from California? She's on the Financial Services Committee. Maxine Waters. She's also in the CBC as well. So Nancy Pelosi can say, hey, they can do this, but if they do this, they're cut off. So it's all babysitting. And the problem is that the squad is happy with it. They're happy with it. They're happy not to really push back politically, not just in rhetoric. And on Twitter, they're the tweet squad. They can tweet all this stuff out, yay, which is nice. But when it's actually time to get on the House floor or the Senate floor and actually stop something from passing, mute. And the funny part about the squad, too, about this is that they leverage their power for themselves, just not for the movement. Like the same thing with funding the Capitol Police. Half of them voted present, lowers the threshold needed, right, to actually pass a bill. And the other half voted against it. Now, the ones who voted against it were Black, so they could say, hey, look, I didn't fund the police. And the other half voted present just so they can avoid the scrutiny altogether. And what they're doing is the same thing the Democrats always do. It's called rotating blame. So that back in 2008, when it comes to healthcare, Joe Lieberman was the one who killed it because the Democrats had 60 senators Since Joe Lieberman said no, it brought the threshold to 59, and it got filibustered to death, right? So it's the same thing with the progressives are doing right now, even though they have a slim majority, which they can leverage their power, is that they're splitting their votes up, being extremely strategic, I might add. Like, the idea that they aren't strategic is bullshit, because they do it for themselves, just not for us. When we need something, oh, well, we don't really know the strategy. We have to wait and see. But when it's for them and their political ass is in trouble, oh, clockwork, they figured it out. So
Exactly. And the Capitol Police bill, like that was actually an opportunity where the squad actually could have made a difference with their vote. The fact that Ayanna Pressley and Cori Bush, they did the right thing, but then you had Rashida Tlaib, Tamal Bowman, and AOC, like you said, they voted present. That's just messed up, because if just one of them would have went the other way, I think the difference was one or two would have went the other way, then that bill would not have passed. They couldn't even do that.
Yeah, I mean that is the shocking part. Like, when a lot of my lefty friends on Twitter explain what happened, they're like, "What the fuck?" Like, it's not that they don't have a strategy; it's that they're not strategizing for us. So yeah, that's the problem. And the endless tongue baths with Ilhan Omar, basically Auntie Nancy, AOC, Mama Bear, Auntie Nancy. It's just dreadful. And they're all giving Pramila Jayapal giving Biden an A, still giving him an A, saying he's doing a great job. And it's like, the bar is literally so low, it's undetectable. Like, if Biden basically doesn't do anything Trump does relatively, then they deem that as progressive. And it's like, right. It's scary. It's literally scary, because look at the polls right now. Like, Biden has a 60% favorability rating among really my generation, millennials and Gen Z. The reason why I claim both is because I'm that weird middle area. Like, I'm too old a little bit to be a Gen Z, but too young to be millennial. Mm-hmm. So I kind of attach myself to both. But that's the scary part, because Biden isn't progressive. He is right to the Reagan on many issues. So young people coming in, they're going to tie their politics to him. And the reason why I know this, because millennials are the ones who put Obama into office in 2008, and he screwed them over. So that's what I don't want to repeat of what happened last time, what happened in 2008 with my generation, Gen Z, coming through. Because look what happened. I'm gonna give an example about how electorally we're becoming more powerful. Look at what happened with Ed Markey's race.
Yep.
As soon as Gen Z started to be able to vote, he won 40%. He won plus 40% of the young people vote, which helped him win the election. Because every other age demographic, silent generation, boomer, Gen X, millennial, he was split 50-50 with Senator Kennedy.
Yep, that was my state.
Right, Massachusetts. So, and guess who got him over? Young people, ages 18 to 24. So I think we're actually more willing to vote than previous generations. We just get shitted on because not many of us can vote. Like, the mainstream media always says, oh, well, young people don't vote. Well, my generation, the oldest ones, only 10 or 20% of us can vote. And it's millions of young people. So once that gate unlocks, then more of us will be able to vote and change the political system. That's why I believe we should lower the voting age to 16, because the argument against people saying, oh, well, they're just going to vote whatever their parents vote on. Well, you could be still old and dumb and in terms of voting and not knowing. So the argument that young people can't make up their own minds about voting is ludicrous. So that's my opinion on that.
Agreed. I want to get your opinion on Bernie, because he was also in the news this week as well. How do you feel about Bernie backing down on? Remember, he was gonna push on the floor. He was gonna push back on giving more arms and aid to Israel, and then he backed off of that.
Well, at times, the House Progressives and the CPC, which is the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Bernie is the only senator in the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Go figure. But I do feel at times, the squad and Bernie try to coordinate how they're going to do power, but I haven't really heard any groundwork of the House Progressives willing to block it in the House, because it has to be voted on by the House and the Senate. So by Bernie being the lone dog, his good friend Joe Biden would come into him and say, hey, this isn't worth it, back down. This isn't something you want to fight over. And Biden would whisper into his ear saying, well, see, if you don't do this, think about all the other stuff I can get down the line for you. And Bernie, being the cuck he is at times, will say, okay, Joe, let's just do this. And it's I I don't know. And I want to be fair to Bernie at times. Like, yes, I'm hard on him because I feel like the things he should go hard on, he doesn't. But I do understand at times, too, look at other measures he tried to do with the $15 minimum wage. Like when the Democrats screwed him in the budget reconciliation bill, when it was thrown in initially, he only needed 51 votes. But the Democrats taking it out, voting to take it out, they filibustered their own bill, meaning now to put it back in the bill, it would need 60 votes. And what happened? The Democrats and Republicans all voted in droves against it, killing it. And that happens a lot with Bernie. So I do want to be fair with that and honest. So, but the things in terms of Bernie does, which can be easy by blocking this stuff, I believe he should, especially since a lot of young people, even a lot of young Jewish people as well, they're starting to understand what's happening really right now in Israel. What's going with the Palestinians is unacceptable. So I believe if you show some muscle in that regard, it could be really beneficial politically because everyone, regardless if you're a right-wing conservative, everyone loves that politician that shows up there and acts tough and say, I'm standing up for something. So I believe that does help, especially during this climate.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I was a huge like Bernie supporter, and I actually got people who never would have voted for Bernie to vote for Bernie in the primaries. Like people that would, I got my mom to vote for Bernie. So it's like, and friends who were like, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for Warren. Like I got them to vote for Bernie, and I never thought we'd see him this way. I really thought that him still being in the Senate, he would push and push on these issues, but I see him like tweeting about it, and then I see him in actuality just like caving in. And it's really disappointing. I'm like, dude, at this point, I mean, come on, career wise, you're pretty much Bernie's probably going to retire at some point, obviously, right? Probably a couple more years, right? Okay. What is the harm of pushing for these things now? Like, what are they going to do to you? And when Bernie says that him and Joe are good friends, they are really good friends. And this is going back, like Joe Biden's been in office for like, what, 40 freaking years. So they really are very close. And that could be part of it. But at the same time, like you were leading this movement. And I like a lot of us, like, we're really passionate about this movement. And this goes back to what Compton Jay was talking about when he said, this is why politicians should not lead a movement.
I agree 100%. And I think there's 2 points I'm going to add to this. I think the biggest mistake Bernie made is not really going down with the ship. Like, even when he recognized that his own campaign is failing, by the way, due to his own faults, not to the faults of really the organizers, those really propping him up, he should have went down with the ship. And this may not be a fair comparison, but the way Trump went down with the ship really in 2020, notice how his followers have actually, he's increased support among his fringe base. Now, his overall support among Republicans is tanking because he's not on mainstream media all the time because they literally blocked him from mainstream media. Like literally, Twitter blocked, YouTube blocked, so yada, yada, yada. But if Bernie actually would have went down with the ship and said, look, fuck it. I'm 78. I've waited all my life to see the change I've been preaching about for the last 40 years. Fuck it, the Democratic Party, I'm going down with the ship and going independent. He would have garnered more support. Even there's tons of people that said, look, if Bernie had some fucking balls, I would have voted for him if he went independent. I think Bernie fears the Democratic Party so much because look at the political climate he's in. He's a registered independent in the state of Vermont, which is a Democratic state. So Bernie, by being independent, he can't piss off the Dems because they'll run a challenger against him and easily it could be problematic, right? So what Bernie does is he caucuses with the Dems in the state and with the Republican. And if he caucuses with the Dems, who have a majority in the state of Vermont, the Republicans have no chance. So that's why the Republicans rarely bring a challenger against them. And this really transcends nationally, too. And he always brags about, hey, I'm independent, but I caucus with the Dems. So I just wish he would go down with the ship more because there's tons of apolitical and independent people who may not agree with him on policy all the time, but they see him as honest because of how he stands up for what he believes in. Like, that's what people want in a leader, right?
Right.
And the other part I wish progressives would do is fuck the House of Representatives. I know it's easier, but it's literally no power, right? So so Lyndon Johnson said this in 1960s when I believe it was George H.W. Bush asked him about what it's like being in Congress. And he said, well, the Senate is chicken salad and the House is chicken shit. There's no power. There's no power in the House. That's why you need tons of people to make a change. Well, if you're in the Senate, if we had some progressives in the Senate, I know I bragged about, divest electoral politics. I get it. But I believe too that if you're into electoral politics and you want to try this, let's try getting more people in the Senate more. We should have pushed for Paula Jean Swearengin harder during the time when she was running, because that was a great opportunity. Being in West Virginia, the coal miners, the industry was struggling. People needed a hero. Going against the evil Joe Manchin, we could have avoided this entire situation if we pushed for her more. But I'm saying, if you're one of those leftists who still are into electoral politics, try pushing for the Senate more, because you could be the asshole and kill everything, literally. Like, it's been done before. Like Joe Lieberman, all these different Republicans, Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz. Like, try that method out. If that doesn't work too, and I'm probably going to get pushed back for this saying, oh, we've tried that already. I understand it, but if you try it that way, maybe that could work too. Because I feel like the squad, even though they have right now a big enough squad to really force change because of the slim majority in the House, they're still not doing it. Whether if you're in the Senate, regardless of the political scenario, you could essentially kill one bill, because that's what the rules are. That's the filibuster, So I think we should, try it out and see it. If it doesn't work, then really it doesn't work. Then we should try something different.
Agreed. I also feel like Bernie should have called the DNC out, especially like when he decided to suspend his campaign. I wish he would have done that. I mean, look, Hillary Clinton is still blaming Bernie Sanders. If I see this woman one more time, I got to tell you, RJ, I'm so sick of hearing this woman's voice. She is still blaming like Bernie Sanders for the reason why she lost. It's always someone else's fault except for hers.
Oh, she learns from Obama. Obama came out and said, well, see, black people, it was institutional pressure why I couldn't basically speak out against the killing of black men. And it's like, like my little face is like this, and it's like, okay. So the same thing with Hillary. Everything is our fault. Everything is the Russians. It's it's the stupid voters. It's the deplorables. I won. Like the most bullshit thing. She went overseas while the president was overseas, which apparently in the political sense, you cannot talk shit about the United States if you're in politics and the president's not home. And so what she said, and this is why it comes to your point, she said, well, I won the states, I won the percentage of the vote that had 2/3 of the nation's GDP. What she's saying is like, those who have money and those who are rich, they're the ones who voted the right way, but the other third, those voted the wrong way. So she's been all about this blaming other sides, other factions of America, because she's a shit politician who couldn't offer something to change their lives. So yeah, that's about Hillary.
Agreed, 100%. I just really wish that Bernie, at that point, I felt like he had nothing to lose. Why didn't you speak out against it? Like, why didn't I think that really made like a lot of like leftists upset? Because just like, dude, how can you just sit back and take this? How they cheated him. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Come on, go back and look at Iowa. It was okay for Buttigieg to announce that he had won. They weren't even halfway done with the votes yet. I don't understand. Like, why didn't he call that out? Why didn't he say anything? So that was like really like frustrating for me to like watch that. And then to see him go out here and, he worked really hard for Hillary to try to get her elected. He's trying to work really hard for Joe now to get like leftists to accept Joe. And Joe Biden is just constantly, he is just shitting on leftist policies. He's shitting on young people. He's shitting on black people. Remember, you go back to that dinner that he had. He said nothing would fundamentally change. And that's exactly what he's doing.
I agree 100% on that. And I think I want to give a lot of credit to the OG leftists, because your first part was about Bernie again. A lot of the OG leftists back in 2016 realized that when it come down to it, when you got to get your hands dirty, Bernie wasn't willing to do the ultimate move. The ultimate move in 2016 is, you cheated me so bad and blatantly that Donald Trump himself can fucking see it. It happened in 2020 again. Like, literally Trump would tweet, like, of course he made a smear about Elizabeth Warren, but he even said Elizabeth Warren would have dropped out before Super Tuesday. Bernie would have won every primary state. Hey lefties, come join my team. It's evident the Democratic Party are cheaters. And it's like, yes, a broken clock is right twice a day, but it's like, come on now. Like, we see this. A lot of the OG leftists in 2016 recognized this. Like, even Bernie would have had even like people like Jesse Ventura, who would have endorsed him, who was an independent who won in Minnesota back and from 1999 to, I believe, 2002, he was the governor there. And he ran an independent campaign and beat Hubert Humphrey's son. I believe it was son or grandson. And Hubert Humphrey is a known figure. He was Lyndon Johnson's vice president during the 1960s. So
Yep.
so that family is huge there. And in terms of the family name, same with the Kennedys in Massachusetts, same way in Minnesota. And so I feel like Bernie made a misstep, and a really big misstep, which ended up hurting the movement by really not going nuclear. And Jesse Ventura during 2016 literally flew out to wherever Bernie was going to go and said, "Hey, are you willing to go independent?" And Bernie said, "No, I'm here to support Secretary Clinton for presidency." And at that, everyone knew it wasn't the same. It wasn't going to be the same. You know, it's like, I think that's the sad part. A lot of the OG leftists know about that. And if you fast forward to 2020, the endless, my good friend Joe, like, I believe Joe Biden's decent. It's like, once you say that, it's over. Like, that's what happened in the Jimmy Kimmel interview back in the 2020 race. Once you say that about Joe Biden, and people are like, well, you're nice, Bernie, but we'll use you in the Senate. We just go with Joe Biden. And that's literally what fucking happened. Yep. Like, literally, like, they lost the plot. So it's, I think, whatever his cultural advisors are, which tell him the nice stuff to say to get voters, they're probably some of the worst I've ever seen. And of course, he had like people like Jeff Weaver, Chuck Rocha in his campaign at times who give really bad advice to Bernie. So that's kind of the thing. But that's what's wrong with Bernie. He could be right on the policies, but in terms of how you lead a movement and in terms of how you run a campaign, he has to be one of the worst I've ever seen. Like, Bernie, literally the last debate in the DNC primary, where it's like, it's him versus Joe. I'm like, put the gloves on, put the fucking gloves on. And he was on the CNN debate, and even prior to the debate, he gave the entire plot away. He said, "Look, Joe, hey Joe, are you gonna do like Medicare? Are you gonna do healthcare? Hey Joe, you know, you're gonna do this." And it's like, Bernie, he's literally taking notes. Like, you do realize this is what, if you're telling Joe Biden what you're going to talk about before the debate, Joe Biden's most on-script guy. He can just have his script writer write all the responses and debunk you live stream, even if it's like a smear piece. And that's the problem. Like, Joe Biden, he had the juice during the debate. I don't know what cocktail he had on. Like, I don't know if he had like Adderall or some type of stuff, but it was pathetic. Yeah, like Boscore 777 said on the stream, it was pathetic. It was absolutely pathetic. Like, going on the interview, giving the plot away, telling Joe Biden what you're going to debate him on before the actual debate, and then during the debate, instead of referencing what Joe Biden was doing on the Senate, advocating for cutting for Social Security and Medicare, he just says, "Go to the YouTube right now." And it's like, you tell us. People want you to say what's going on. Like, yes. And okay, I'm going to be controversial when I say this, but for the young people and for people that are already for you, don't excessively pander to people who are already for you. Like, know that they're for you. Just as long as you do what you're doing to keep them there, don't excessively pander. Go out and reach and expand the bench that way. So I feel like Bernie, by doing that, he was trying to increase his turnout amongst more young people, even though young people overwhelmingly were already for him. Like, look at all the demographics. Like, millennials and Gen Z, I believe it was like 77% of people voted for Bernie. Then you go to Gen Xers, it was like 65. And then you go to, I think I skipped one, millennials and Gen Xers, 65, 55. And then once you hit the boomers, that's when it flipped the other way. So it's like, I wish he would have like made his message a lot better and still have the same policies, because we know the establishment is going to use all the populist, progressive, like lefty rhetoric and have the same shitty capitalist policies. So I wish Bernie would have flipped it and did to the establishment, to them, what they do to us all the time. And I've talked way too much, but I'm just really passionate about this.
No, it's true. And I feel like your point about Elizabeth Warren, she knew at that point in time, mathematically, she was not going to win. She still didn't want to drop out. And she said, I care about these progressive issues. I care about everyone having healthcare in this country. If she really cared about those things, then she would have dropped out before Super Tuesday. She would have endorsed Bernie, and we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. That is the thing about her. I think that was just so frustrating. She knew she couldn't win, and she stayed in anyway. And I was in Massachusetts, and I'm just like, look, she didn't win her own state. Okay.
But here's the thing. The thing you're missing, though, is that, come on now, she's a woman politician. She wanted to show her kids that she could be from her background and see her name on the ballot and be able to vote for herself. And it's like, you literally, okay, so this is how Elizabeth Warren lost the plot. If she would have dropped out, she was guaranteed 100% to be the vice president, 100%. regardless of how he felt about her during that time, she would have been the vice president if she dropped out and Bernie would have won the primary. Automatic. No question, no questions asked. Because they couldn't use the plot of, oh, well, see, you guys aren't, offering stuff to black people. Like during the primary race, Bernie Sanders at times was leading by 1% over Joe Biden in terms of who black people were supporting. So they couldn't use that against us. So that's bad politics on Elizabeth Warren's part. And the part about Liz Warren, which is funny, is that she endorsed Joe Biden and simped for Joe Biden so hard not to get jack shit for it. So that's the funniest part.
Yeah, where is she at now? And now she's like, oh, we're going to continue to push for President Biden to cancel the student loan debt. And I'm just like, no, dude, your career is done. Like, just one thing I want to plug here. I know you got to go soon, RJ, but one thing I want to plug, because I think this is important for people to know about Elizabeth Warren. When Elizabeth Warren ran for Senate, the first race, that was actually a very close race here in Massachusetts. She could have lost that. What helped her win was young people, her wanting to cancel student loan debt, her fighting against like Wall Street. Young people really came out for her. And then the second time when she ran against a Trump supporter. So the competition wasn't as fierce the second time. But I just want to say to everybody, Elizabeth Warren is not as well loved here in Massachusetts as mainstream media would make you think.
Yeah, I do want to add too, really about Elizabeth Warren, is that Elizabeth Warren's biggest thing is being on the Senate Banking Committee. And what she does is she rakes Wells Fargo over their coals, rakes Bank America over their coals. I forgot who that guy was, Mr. Crump. He was the former CEO of Wells Fargo. So she's very good at ranking these big banking executives over their coals, going in great detail, and she's really good at it. The issue is there's no accountability. There's no fines. And really they get to keep all the money they made during the times, all the bonuses, all the stocks or whatever. And there's no true accountability and punishment for those banking companies and organizations that do harm towards their own employees, to their own customers, and to regular American people. So in the eyes of those big executives, it's look, it's like getting in trouble with your parent. I'm getting raked over the coals, yelled at, screamed at. But at the end of the day, for these banking executives, they know there's going to be a punishment. And the reason why I know that is because look at the most recent thing with Elizabeth Warren. She was on the Senate Banking Committee, and she was raking Jamie Dimon over the coals. And Jamie Dimon's like, look, you're not going to touch me. Democrats love me. You're just putting on the show. And it's like, I mean, his facial expression wasn't phased at all. He was almost laughing at her. It's all, and right, like I said, it's all theater. So that's the crazy part, because then we don't win. And the reason why Elizabeth Warren is doing this is because she's always dived deep into culture war. Like the selfie line, her stupid dancing, always making herself seem super progressive in rhetoric. When it comes down, beer. Oh yeah, having a beer. Oh, the beer thing, that was hilarious. So it says she started this. Oh yeah, I forgot what the CFP stood for, but I actually know exactly what they're talking about. And she allowed it to be completely gutted. Yeah, she tried to work on. So that was her biggest shtick before she became a senator. Is like she worked with the Obama administration. Like she was the one being more antagonistic towards Joe Biden, and also being pretty antagonistic towards the Obama administration. So much that Obama's like, well, here, damn, just get off my back. And then for her as United States senator, who basically, and I don't know if she directly does overwatch over this organization inside the executive branch, but for herself not to go in rhetoric and attacking the degradation of the CFPB, I think is absolutely disgraceful, because that's your big thing. Like every politician, the Consumer Financial Protection. Thank you. I knew exactly what that was. I didn't know the name, but for you to completely allow something that you championed on entering your political career to be completely eviscerated, it shows that you never gave a damn in the first place.
Exactly. Well, RJ, I know you have to go to another stream, but I want to say thanks so much for coming on. This has been so fun. I feel like I've talked to you about this forever.
Oh, it was great. I had a blast. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.